How do you spell beer bliss? With the letters G, A, B, and F. Tickets to the Great American Beer Festival, also known as GABF, are available July 30th for members of the American Homebrewers Association and July 31st for the general public. Sample America's finest beers at the country's seminal tasting event. Learn more at greatamericanbeerfestival.com. That's greatamericanbeerfestival.com. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, July 11th, 2019. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, members of the Rhode Island Brewing Society share their experiment testing which yeast is best for brewing New England IPAs. We'll taste half a dozen samples to see which one brings the juiciness. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. And if you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other basic brewing gear, including our tie-dye silicone pint and our brewing rainbow shirt. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you do us a favor of rating us on iTunes and maybe leaving a nice comment, they say that'll help new listeners to find us. And if you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And many thanks to everybody who's doing that. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. My son Drew is home for a bit after graduating from the University of Washington. He helped me bottle the next round of the hop sampler. And next time it will be French Strusselspalt, Styrian Goldings, and Styrian Celia. All three are low alpha hops that Steve picked out, and I used a whole ounce of each in the 1 gallon sampler batches that I made. I think it's going to be a tough one for Steve and me to determine which one is which, as if we have an easy time ever. But the beers were all tasty going into the bottles, which is always good news. Speaking of good news, our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast have some good news for Kvike fans. Their new seasonal is A44 Kviking. Casey at Imperial says Kviking is a blend, so it's a bit closer to a traditional Kvike that would be found in Norway. It is a Kvike, so it'll tolerate high fermentation temperatures, and in fact it thrives there. And since it's a blend, if you harvest and repitch, Casey says it should change over a couple generations, providing some interesting flavor and aroma changes. So you can use Kviking for anything from new school hazy IPAs to traditional Norwegian farmhouse brews. And it also works well, she says, when you're fermenting kettle-soured worts, when you want a strong tropical fruit character. So check with your local homebrew supply store for A44 Kviking from Imperial Organic Yeast and take advantage of this summer heat. Put it to use and brew in some delicious beers. Kviking from Imperial Organic Yeast. Let's take a look into the mailbag. I got a couple letters from Australia on no-chill brewing, since I've been doing a lot of that lately. Trevor from Central Victoria, Australia, writes, my process has evolved over the past few years, but my typical method is to bring 5 liters of water to the boil and throw in between 40 to 50 grams of hop pellets for around 20 minutes. While the hops are boiling, I fill my 23-liter plastic fermenter with around 10 liters of cold water. After flame out, I add 1.5-liter cans, or 2 1.5-liter cans of pale malt extract, typically the Briess Pilsen Light. Give it a brief stir and then pour it directly into my fermenter, which I then top up with cold water. So Trevor just boils hops in water, just plain water, and then adds the extract at the end. He says, last year I built a temperature-controlled fermentation fridge using a $50 Australian currency Inkbird controller and a $25 heat belt, which hangs inside the fridge. I found the bar fridge on a local marketplace for $25. Pretty good investment for $100 total in my book, he says. Long story short, I take my fermenter full of hot wort to the garage, place it in the fermentation fridge overnight, and next morning give it a vigorous stir and pitch my yeast. It then goes back into the fridge until fermentation is complete. Trevor says, I'm a bit of a set-and-forget-it kind of guy, so the fridge is permanently at 19 degrees Celsius, give or take a degree Celsius. Trevor says, I typically dry hop with anywhere from 80 to 120 grams of hop pellets when the specific gravity reaches around 1020. Once it's done, I run the beer off into a 19-liter corning keg and age it in my kegerator for around 2 weeks before I tap the keg. I Velcro tie a muslin sock to the end of the hose to catch any undesirables that might block up the keg. Well, that's a good idea. Trevor says he learned that lesson the hard way. So very cool. Alan from Busselton, Western Australia, has a simpler approach. He writes in and asks that I give a shout-out to the brewers in Busselton, Western Australia. Hey, everybody in Busselton. Alan says, I've noticed that you are doing no-chill now, and I thought I would let you know what me and other brewers do here. It is quite simply to rack the hot wort straight into a plastic fermenter that can handle the heat and put an airlock on it and just let it sit out overnight. In the morning, it is usually around 17 to 19 degrees and just pitch yeast. So there you go. Keeping it simple, Alan in Busselton. Yeah, a bunch of folks have said, you put your hot wort in that plastic container and then you transfer it to a glass carboy. Well, I maybe I'll try it the other way, but I kind of like seeing what's going on in glass or transparent plastic. But that's just me. It's fun to hear how other people are doing stuff. Let's talk about our friends and sponsors, Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. You hear me brag all the time about their Warthog electric controllers and systems. High Gravity's been building their own controllers for more than a decade, but if you take a look at highdgravitybrew.com, you can see electric brewing gear from other manufacturers too. For instance, Dave says the mash and boil with the pump is an all-in-one system that is a great value in the 120-volt 5-gallon space at just $399. Dave says the new controllers from Blickman are also a great value. Both the Simple Power Controller and the Brew Commander, with its touchscreen interface, can control additional power relays to scale up as needed for high performance at an unbeatable price. And, not to be outdone, Dave says High Gravity has updated their own simplest Warthog controller, the Kettle controller, that you can now use to control additional power modules. So, you know that High Gravity is a great place to go for their own proprietary stuff, but if you're just getting started in electric brewing or wanting to go up in your game, take a look at all the options at highdgravitybrew.com, where they take the pain out of propane at family-owned and operated highdgravitybrew.com. Okay, the Rhode Island Brewing Society put on an impressive performance at HomebrewCon. They brewed up some excellent beers to serve at the social club and the club night, and we were very fortunate that Alex McIntosh and Scott Mendes shared their awesome experiment comparing half a dozen yeasts in tasty New England IPAs. All right, this is something unusual here in Basic Brewing Radio. We're doing a club tasting or a group tasting, and there's not a bed in the room. We're actually in a conference room. We're with members of the Rhode Island Brewing Society. We have Alex McIntosh.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This is a pretty awesome experience for us.
And Scott Mendez.
Hey, thank you.
And we have the usual suspects. We have Steve Wilkes from stevesbrewshop.com.
.com. Hey, James.
Zod O'Connor.
.com.
And Bob Stemsky.
Go Packers.
He's an owner, you know. So first of all, tell us about the, who wants to talk about the Rhode Island Brewing Society? Who are you?
Yeah, so we're the Rhode Island Brewing Society, RIBS for short. We're used to be a small club that was started in 2011 by a group of 5 friends that just started brewing together and decided to make a homebrew club in the greater Providence area. There's about 3 homebrew clubs in Rhode Island, and right now we have the largest membership at about 70 people. We have exploded in a membership the past 3 years, and it's just been a really awesome experience and growing big. Everyone's brewing. It's just a fun time, and especially with the AHA Homebrew Con in Providence.
Yeah. And what was it like to? I assume that y'all were integral in getting this thing happening, right?
Sure. I've only been part of the club for about a year, but it was well underway before I joined.
Yeah, they decided to come to Providence about 2 or 3 years ago when the club was still pretty young and the Rhode Island brew scene was still very young, not that many breweries. But as most places in the country, Boston has exploded in popularity with, all their breweries, Trillium, Treehouse, all the great ones up there, and Providence and Rhode Island are following suit. We now, I believe, have almost 30 breweries in the state. It's doubled since last year. A really explosive craft beer scene here.
Wow. And what gets brewed here? What's popular?
Well, obviously, New England IPA is king. I'd say all the New England IPAs, the milkshake beers, is becoming more popular. And Providence and Greater Rhode Island does a pretty good sour. A lot of great sours.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as I say about, every time we talk about cloudy beers or New England IPAs, you guys are ruining beer for everybody else. This is destroying craft beer.
It is what it is. If that's the case, then why is craft beer continuing to explode in popularity, and why does every brewery have a New England or a hazy IPA? Traditionalists can hate on it, but the market speaks for itself.
Yeah, I say that sarcastically because I love the stuff. I like any beer that tastes good and is fun to drink and fun to brew. Yeah. If you don't like them, don't drink them. If you don't like them, don't brew them. So
well, with the New England IPA, there's a lot of bad examples of New England IPAs out there. Let's be honest, a lot of terrible ones and very few really great ones. So in our club, we have a ton of NEIPA lovers. So we decided to put this experiment together of the same malt bill, same hop charge, and then change yeast. We're trying to dial in that perfect NEIPA for members to brew and just continue to learn more about the style.
Which brings us to Scott, who's got an open phone in front of him with details, I'm assuming.
So many details. So it started with a 5.5 to 6 gallon batch for each. 60-minute mash. We mashed in at 152 degrees. The boil was for 60 minutes. The target OG was 1060 specific gravity. Our target IBU, 35. We were targeting a bitterness ratio of 0.500 to 0.650. Our water profile was 100 ppms of calcium, 12 ppms of sodium, 150 ppms of chloride, and 100 for sulfate. Water to grist ratio was 1.33 quarts a pound. We all dialed in our water profile based on distilled RO or fresh out the faucet.
Yeah.
The recipe was 70% raw two-row malt, 25% flaked oats, 5% honey malt. And target pH was 5.3. Everyone used lactic acid. And let's see here. There was a 1 teaspoon yeast nutrient addition at 10 minutes. And as far as hop additions, at 15 minutes, it was a target of 12 to 15 IBUs of Columbus. And we whirlpooled at 170 degrees for 30 minutes with 2 ounces of Citra and 2 ounces of Mosaic. And 7 days after yeast pitch, we dry hopped for 3 days at around 68 degrees with 2 ounces of Citra and 2 more ounces of Mosaic.
And I think this is a first. This is the first time that I've actually handed my mic to someone else. I mean, did you notice that? He just reached up and took it. I was like, well, okay. He seems to know what he's doing. So I assume it was a full hour boil.
Yes, it was a 60-minute boil.
Okay. And the bittering, would we call that a bittering charge at 15 minutes before the end of the boil then? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you're still getting the IBUs necessary. If you boil that same amount for longer, obviously you get more of an IBU contribution. But just a quick, simple charge to get that 15-minute boil. Don't get a ton of isomerization to make it too bitter, but just that 15 minutes to just get enough to balance it.
And 170 degrees, does that seem to be the sweet spot for, like a hop stand?
Yeah, so, talking NEIPAs, there's so many different ways you can go about this. Some people claim that the chloride to sulfate ratio is king, and that's what makes a soft mouthfeel. Some say you have to have at least 40% adjuncts of flaked oats and whatnot. But one thing that is becoming more and more of a consensus is the whirlpool temperature. So if you cut your flame off your burner, you're still going to stay above 200 for quite a while, unless you're brewing in a Wisconsin winter. But so you're going to get a ton of isomerization. You're going to get a lot of bitterness that you don't want. You want that great hot flavor without the bitterness. So around 170 degrees is when the isomerization does not happen anymore. You have to have it over that temperature to really get those alpha acids to isomerize to give you the bitterness. So 170, you're still extracting all those great hop oils, but not getting the bitterness.
Cool. We've tried different hop stand temperatures and haven't experimented with it enough to be 100% sure. So it's nice that you guys have brewed enough and played with these things enough that it sounds like you know what you're talking about.
Well, it's all about confidence. We act like we do.
That's what it's all about. So is this just a sampling of or is this all of the yeast that you guys tried?
I believe we had about 10 total yeasts that were brewed. 10 members participated with 10 different yeast strains. Unfortunately, we only have 6 here today because some folks weren't able to make it to the conference. But yeah, we had the 6 different yeast. And going back to what makes a good NEIPA, one thing that no one can agree on is what kind of yeast strain. Some say you have to do a traditional English strain like Y yeast. Is there London L3, I can't remember the number of it. 1318. Yeah, some people say just use a standard Chico yeast. And, the London Fog from White Labs has been real popular. It's traced back to the Heady Topper Conan strain. And just no one can have a consensus on what the yeast is. So we started with the yeast. Let's try all the different yeast and see what makes it. So do you have a list of the yeast that we're going to try today, Scott?
Yeah. We have White Labs 067 Coastal Haze. We have Imperial Loki, which is a Kvike strain. We have Imperial Yeast Juice, Fermentus Safale SO4, Lallemand BRY 97 American Ale, which should be interesting, and Bootleg Biology's NEIPA blend.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So where should we start? Which is the most likely? Should we go like the most likely suspect and then kind of deviate, or
let's go with a very traditional one, which would be the US04 standard dry yeast, readily available, and all of your listeners can probably get their hands on it within a day.
Steve'sBrewshop.com.
That's right.
Shameless plug. And we didn't have to do that one. Okay, and we're sharing small samples.
So this is English ale yeast.
Yeah, the SO4.
SO4.
And you don't have to worry about stirring up the sediment on the bottom of the... You have to take care of Scott there. Cheers, everybody, by the way. Virtual toast.
Yummy.
Oh, you spoke first.
Yummy. That tastes good. It's a little bit bready. It's kind of nice. There's a nice fruitiness to it, almost kind of like I don't know, like a little bit of banana, but not heavy bites in banana. It's just real light. I like it. It's a little yeasty, which it probably should be. Nice and hazy. It's nice and juicy. Yeah.
Get a lot of grapefruit.
Not a lot of aroma on it. It is very cold, which might lead to that, and not a lot of head on it either for the listeners watching.
But it is delicious.
It is delicious. I like to say ditto for everybody, but but yeah, it's very good. And on the end of it, it does seem, I don't know, dry to me, but there's a flatness to it or something. I mean, it's very good.
I agree with that, Bob. Yeah, it kind of finishes much drier. Flat, I don't know that I go there, but I know what you're saying. I know where you're headed. But yeah, it does finish out drier than I would have expected SO4 to finish out, for sure.
So this beer finished at 10:10.
And what's your sensory perception, Scott?
Oh, I love this yeast. I think it's really simple. It's very fruity. It works well with the style. It's easily accessible. So I mean, any home brewer should definitely give it a shot.
Yeah. Right upon pouring up my nose, upon pouring up my nose. That's an interesting one. Upon pouring, I immediately perceived the strong mosaic character from the dry hop and all the mosaic in there. Kind of that interesting tropical but a little caddy at times aroma. But yeah, I'm with Bob and everyone here. It's finished quite dry. It's a little yeasty. I also get a little bit of the traditional English esters from this yeast as well.
It's very drinkable. And, it's not, sometimes these big juicy beers are, a little too milkshakey or a little too, the mouth feels a little too much for me. And they're harder to drink, but this one is pretty drinkable.
This one could disappear from your glass by accident pretty fast.
I have a leaky glass. So shall we give a little splash of water in each to clear the cups and clear the palate a little bit?
Tell my wife officially that I've had some water this weekend for the first time.
Some water without barley in it. I love these experiments because they're delicious as well as informative. So where do we go next?
All right, let's see what we got here. White Labs Coastal Haze.
So this is one that's specifically designed for this style of beer? I assume it's a new one.
Yeah, this is pretty new to the market. We can talk to the White Labs folks over in the expo hall, but I think this year might have been the first year they released it, at least in a more of a mass production.
Now this one's a little more transparent than the previous one. They're both kind of what would you call it? A straw color, or it's not as cloudy as the first one.
It's not
at all.
Getting a mint note off of this.
The fruit really jumps out on the flavor.
Yeah, and all these beers are kegged, so they're all transferred to the bottle via keg. There's no bottle conditioning in these.
Which, if they're a little, the first one was a little undercarbonated, so that might account for that.
Which was this yeast again?
WLP 067 Coastal Haze.
What do you think, Steve?
It's a nice beer. I think it's a little less fruity, a little less luscious than the first beer. So it finishes a dry like the first beer, but it doesn't have that lushicity. Is that a word?
It is now.
It is now. It's good though. It's very nice.
To me, there's a little bit more bitterness. The bitterness comes through a little bit more, and the fruit flavors are a little sharper, kind of.
Yeah, it's a little thinner, and there's a sharpness to it a little bit. But like Steve said, it's drinkable fine, but it's definitely not as plush as the first one.
Yeah, plush is a good word.
I think what I'm picking up is a bit of harshness, almost a little more stringency. I'm picking up more hop vegetal character, not vegetal as in cooked corn, but like actually the twigs and the leaves of the hops. And I think that's kind of what we're all dancing around. Is it's thinner, it's more harsh. Like I would have thought it was a very different grist bill than the hop bill.
If I had told you this was a traditional American IPA, would that change your perception of it? Because I would not call this a traditional New England IPA. I would say this teeters more American IPA.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's for the style, it's definitely a little more bitter than it should be, and the fruit doesn't come through. Not like Saffiel 04. That was like a fruit bomb compared to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you were to hand me this and tell me that it was a traditional American IPA that was a little bit hazy, I'd say, yeah, it's right on. It's delicious, and it is good. It does taste good, but it's not that juicy, plush character that we had in the first one, and that we would expect. I think, but still enjoyable. It's funny how this is a fairly new style, but we're already pigeonholing. We're just we're locking it in and saying, and whereas before it was breaking boundaries, and now we're putting it in new boundaries.
No, totally. It's funny. Up here in New England, we keep on saying, "Oh, that's a traditional NEIPA. That's a traditional New England IPA." 3 years, 5 years.
It goes all the way back 3 years ago, way back. which in this day and age, with the at the speed of what we're evolving, 3 years is a long time. Okay, where do we go next, Scott?
All right, let's go with the Lalamon BRY 97.
Okay. So what are the specs on that yeast?
I think it's a West Coast yeast, right? You don't know?
I think it is. I think it's considered a Chico or something,
I expected Steve to make a BR 549 joke.
I'm all out.
Steve's tired already. He's ready for a nap. We got a long way to go today.
Yeah, this will be the yeast that I'm the least familiar with, personally.
Yeah, I found the description. It's described as a West Coast ale. Yeast is known for its clean, neutral flavor profile and strong attenuation. With no overwhelming characteristics, this yeast lets your grain and hop choice shine. So,
which is kind of not, what you, but not what you expect with like an English strain. That like the 04 is not a yeast that is known, just getting out of the way.
It looks like a West Coast IPA. It's very clear. Yeah. Has good head on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more nose to this for me, which may be more about the pour and the bottle than anything else, but it really hit an aroma that the other two did not.
I think, again, the bitterness comes through more on this one than the first beer, the South Ale. And the second one, it was pretty bitter, but this is a close second.
Yeah, someone alluded to grapefruit in one of the former beers. I say this also has a very heavy grapefruit flavor to it.
To me, there's kind of a darkness. I don't know if it's from the grain bill or there's something kind of more earthy that comes through. There's an earthy note that comes through on this one that doesn't. That's not. I still get the bright hop character, but there's kind of an underlying, like I say, I don't know if it's a graininess, but there's a sort of a darker complexity to this one.
Yeah, it's almost like a burnt peach pit, kind of. It's just kind of a dark flavor that's not quite anything, really. It's not stone fruit. It's not a raisin. It's not a kumquat. It's just, but there's a dark flavor in there. I agree, and it's not dirt either. It's not dirty flavor. And I don't know much about the strain, and you'd think I would because I sell the brand, but I don't sell that yeast. But I suspect it's got to be pretty close to US-05, I would think, West Coast ale yeast. And so it's just kind of neutral and gets out of the way, and that's what it tastes like. It's neutral and it gets out of the way. Kind of like me at a dance.
Yeah, the fruit, I would maybe say it's a little more riper. You can think about, like, we use descriptors sometimes of light fruit, like a pear versus a darker fruit. In this case, it's just almost the same fruit. It's just riper. It's not sweeter. It's just more ripe, almost a little on the edge of overripe, which, given the hops of Mosaic, I expect something like that out of it.
Yeah, I think it's Mosaic that John Palmer calls rotten fruit or overripe fruit, or it's not his favorite hop. I don't think. So, where is this on the plush scale, Bob?
Down near the bottom. It's not plush at all. It doesn't. There's no that. I hate to say creaminess, but of the first one, that you really feel you got a hazy beer. This is thin. It's perfectly drinkable as a beer, but this is not even close to a NEIPA, I don't think.
No, I would agree with that. If you told me this is a traditional bitter bomb West Coast IPA, I'd say, that's a pretty good example of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely lacks the fruitiness. Once again, I don't know. I would make a West Coast with this. I actually want to do that now.
Yeah. Well, that's sometimes in these experiments, something's bad at one thing, but you think, oh, well, I can try it in this other thing. It'd be just fine. It'd be great.
Juice next? Yeah, save this up for last. All right. Start around yours. Ooh, nice.
Hello. Happy New Year.
I hope it's carbonated.
This is what is that, an insulated growler thingy?
Yeah, nice vacuum seal insulated growler. So hopefully it won't be too cold.
Got any bananas you want to freeze in there, Zod?
It is similar to a nitrous container, having worked in a lab. I have one of those similar growlers. They're really good.
The thing is, if you have to have something like this to keep a beer cold for 14 hours, then you're not a beer drinker. Yeah.
Or you're not in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That's right. So what do we got here, Scott?
So this one is fermented with Imperial juice.
Disclaimer, Imperial is a sponsor of Basic Brewing Radio.
Great yeast. Yeah, our local homebrew shop carries a lot of Imperial, so we certainly love using it within ribs.
Just saying ribs makes me hungry.
I was like, where do you put the yeast on the ribs? Is it part of the dry rub?
Well, that's our hazing. So every new member that joins has to bring us ribs, and based on how good they are, depends on that determines whether they get accepted as a member or not.
So that's a hazing IPA.
Yes.
Oh, Zod jumping in with the dad jokes. So what do you think? Can you get your mind off ribs now, Steve, to talk about the beer?
No, I've been thinking about some pulled pork. This is really, really good, and this is what I would have expected. And for full disclosure, I sell Imperial yeast. So, but this is juicy and doesn't have the bitter back of the throat, IPA bitterness, but it's got that full hop flavor. It's nice and soft. It's juicy. It's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I get the most aroma out of any of the beers so far out of this one, and the flavor is nice and juicy, and the bitterness is in the background rather than up front.
I'd say I still have a bit of a cup of the first one. They're similar in terms of clarity. They're a different color entirely. They're different versions of yellow, but again, this goes back to that first one of it's really drinkable. Like you would find yourself, whoa, where'd that pint go? Yeah. Kind of, especially with a meal or a hot day, this would disappear.
Yeah, on the plush scale, Bob.
Oh, this is up about an 8. The first one, of course, that was the first one. You're always going to screw up on that numbering, but that was a 10. But this is a good 8. It's very good. I mean, it's got all the qualifications of a NEIPA, and I certainly wouldn't have any trouble at all.
To me, if I can cast my mind back on and since you still have some of yours, Zot, maybe you could not collaborate, not coordinate. Cooperate. Thank you. Vocabulary not working. In this one, I think the fruit flavors are a little bit brighter than the first one, from my recollection. What do you think?
Trying them side by side, this one is actually a little sweeter, and I find it a little more mulled. But I actually get the fruit up top, whereas the first one was actually a little more bitter, and a little very slight. That I mentioned, a very slight harshness. So how you actually taste that will be different between people. But you could definitely tell them side by side, very different. You would definitely put these two in a category to themselves compared to two IPAs we had in the middle here.
So how does this rate on the New England IPA scale?
I'd say this is pretty spot on. 8 out of 10. It's fantastic beer. As Zod said, you could easily drink a pint of this and not even know where it went.
Scott?
Yes, it certainly lives up to its name. It's juicy. It's the flavors right there, smack you in the face. The aroma, I would drink this, a lot of it.
Yeah, I think we have a consensus. Anybody want to say anything else about that one?
Well, only that, going back to John Palmer's description of mosaic, that perhaps he's not right or wrong, but that in the application of the beer itself, so mosaic in a beer style like this, I think it's really nice. But I could see where the cattiness or whatever might be off-putting, say, in a more San Diego West Coast-ish style beer. It might be a little bit too much, too astringent, and come through differently. So it's really interesting how, it's the old thing, it's 4 ingredients, but you get 9 million beers out of it.
For sure.
I'm actually quite happy to see that it's in that growler, which means there's a lot more of it left.
Good point. Assuming you're nice, Zod. So far, you've been very well behaved. All right. What do we got next?
All right, next we're going to go to Imperial Yeast. What's this one? Loki.
Okay.
Which is a Kvike strain. Yeah, this is mine. It was brewed with a Kvike strain. It fermented out in 3 days. And
what temperature did you ferment it at?
I started at 80 and then I bumped it to 85 just to see if there was anything left in it, and I just let it go for a week, and then I dry hopped.
And this is the Voss Kvike strain, I believe, and it started out as a seasonal, but it got so popular that it's year-round now.
It's year-round strain. Boy, I don't know when this is going to air, but I just got 10 pouches in. And they're brand new.
But it's been good. But people like it.
People liked it. I think I got like 5 or maybe 10 pouches when it came out seasonally, and kind of had to talk people into it at first. The first 2 or 3, but then all of a sudden, boom, 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 and now it's like I can't keep it. So it's very versatile strain. I haven't tasted this yet, but it's very versatile. You've brewed a couple of beers with it, one at a high temp, I remember. And then I brewed a low temp beer with it, down at a cool 66-degree range, something like that. And both beers were terrific. Different, but terrific. Yeah.
I actually did a split batch, 5 gallons at 90 degrees Fahrenheit and 5 at like 60-something. And different. Zach, go first.
Sorry, Steve. How difficult is this yeast to get for the standard home brewer? Do they need to go online, or are they just hoping that their local homebrew shop can source it?
Well, I can't speak for every homebrew shop, but I personally try to keep a good selection of all the yeast that Imperial carries. But I'm a small shop, and I generally don't keep more than 5 to 10 pouches of any one. And I do try to curate, meaning that sometimes of the year you're not going to sell, say, Darkness. You're not going to sell Guinness strain. Sometimes of the year you're not going to sell Barbarian. It just, which is their Conan strain, I think. But the point just being that homebrew shops that sell it, I know there's different models. There's some that take orders. It's like, hey, I'm going to make an Imperial order, so you guys all get your orders in. I try to be kind of a regular retailer and keep 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pouches of everything in. And I don't mean for this to be an Imperial ad, but they deliver it to me 2-day FedEx. I take it out of an ice cold chest. I put it into an ice cold refrigerator, and the yeast never ever gets hot, ever. And if I ship it to you, I ship it to you on ice. Yeah. And so that chain of custody, I think, is so important. And that's one of the things that I like about this brand and this company. And then that people get such a good result with the beers they make. And so I'm not saying that every brand of Imperial is perfect for every beer, but just like any good product, whether it's White Labs or Y Yeast or Fermentus, it doesn't matter. If you treat it with respect, take care of it, sell it properly, you're going to be good. Back to your original question, is it easy to get? Yeah, it's easy to get. So if your local homebrew store becomes a customer of Imperial, it's not a problem.
This is a well-made beer. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It too is delicious. I'm going to start by saying that the fruitiness of the hops really come through on this one. It may not be as luscious as
it finished drier. It finished drier than but it's really hard to control that with the Kvike.
What did it finish at?
10-10, but it comes across really dry. But it attenuated, what is that, like 80% attenuation? So it's really hard to control. Maybe higher mash temp next time. Add some body back.
It's just amazing how, you can ferment at 90 degrees, 80s or 90s, and it's just clean as a whistle.
This one is an amazing beer. I've considered it actually a notch, quite a couple notches above the other two juicies. First off, it's juicy. It's got the cloudy, but the fruit flavor pops so much for me. I actually put it higher on the luscious flavor, on the lush scale, but we'll find out from Bob what the official score is. But the fruit came through of the hops more so than the other two that we consider NEIPAs. And I think that, to me, is just giving it so much more mouthfeel, too, at the same time. This is my favorite of all of them so far.
Well, on the lush scale, and he named that after me.
Now, it used to be the plush scale.
Yeah, but I like lush better. It's more apropos.
You're living the lush life. So.
Yes, I have been. Well, I agree a little bit with Zot. It's in the top three. I really like the first one, but that is because it was the first one, and that clouds your NEIPA judgment. And this one does have like a hit on it. The other ones thinned out real quick, and it's a little thinner than I would like, but this is a classic style.
Where does it rank on that?
I'll probably give it a solid 7 on the plush lush scale. Fantastic beer. I still can't wrap my head around these yeast fermenting them at 85, 90 degrees and coming out so clean. I was a third-floor apartment brewer when I first started, like many people, and a Rhode Island summer on a third floor, you're getting up to 85 degrees in there. Beer's fermented 90, so all I brewed was really bad saisons. And I wish this yeast was around before I had all the fancy temp control setups and whatnot. One of our members brewed a Doppelbock with this yeast, and he fermented it at 90 just for the sake of having fun. It's going to be on tap at the social club at HomebrewCon, and it's insane how clean it is at 90 degrees.
That's crazy. I don't think we talked about what you thought about the beer, did we?
No, I think it's. I think it and the juice. Those two examples were my favorite, and then the SO4. So those are the three that we all considered to be true NEIPAs. I think I like the juice better. I don't want to say I disagree with you, Zot, but the juice seemed to be a little more luscious and a little more fruity to me. This one went more to. Can I describe it? If the juice was like a banana smoothie, fruit-wise, this is like banana bread. It's a little drier, a little flatter in flavor, I get a little more breadiness out of this one. They're both delicious beers. So I don't really want to vote which one I like best, but that's the difference I taste in the beers.
I would actually agree with that example of a banana smoothie versus banana bread. That actually is very close to how I feel about it, too.
So this is your beer, but what do you say?
I love it, man. I'm going to use this yeast on so many more styles just to experiment.
10 pouches.
All right. Done.
And is this our last one, sadly?
Our last one, yes.
Who have we got here, Scott?
All right. What did you do again? This is
this is my beer. It was brewed with the Bootleg Biology NEIPA blend.
Nice.
Oh. And I believe that they spell it NEEPAH. So they're going full Boston.
Tell me you got that.
Now I got called on. We did a YouTube video where we said NEIPA, and one of the people were commenting, "It's not the way is it." But officially, is it okay to say NEIPA?
I'm from North Carolina, so sure.
I didn't think that was. I was going to have you say coffee to just check you out, to see where your accent's coming from. I didn't think that was a Rhode Island accent. You sound more like us, or the way I used to sound.
No, I moved to Rhode Island 10 years ago for grad school, and then forgot to leave. Love it up here.
Okay, so this is tell us again, the Bootleg Biology
NEIPA blend.
Okay. This is also tasty.
This one, I think that I get the most mosaic out of it. It tastes mosaic-y, and I'm not sure how NEIPA-ish it is to me because it just tastes like a really bright, fresh, really well-made American APA with a really bright hop character of Mosaic, those kind of fruity, multi-flavored hops. I'm not sure I could pick it out in a crowd if I didn't know it's Mosaic, but I really get the hop character in this beer a lot, and I like it quite well.
It's not the cloudiest of the beers. It's not completely clear, but it's not, milky at all.
It's plush lush. I mean, it really is. I mean, it tastes, there you go, creamier or softer on the palate, to my palate, which is nothing to brag about. But some of the other ones were a little more harsher and drier, and this doesn't seem as dry. It's more wet, if that makes sense.
The bitterness comes through not as much as in a standard American IPA or pale ale, but to me there's a sharpness to the fruit flavors that is complementary in my opinion.
I would say that first off, it has the most head of all of them. I went back. I've kept some tasters of the originals, and Bob's dead on. This does not have any of the harshness that we picked up in the other ones. The bitterness is. If you told me it was the same bitterness, I would think you were lying. And the fruit flavors, I would say, are bright. I like that description. That you really get the Mosaic brightness. You don't get the juiciness, the kind of oatmeal mouthfeel out of it as much as the others. But it's. This is kind of like right at the edge of NEIPA versus West Coast IPA. I would say. How
would you compare this to the Imperial Juice? Because when I brewed this, me and another club member brewed it together on his 10-gallon system. So those two beers were the exact same boil, just split into different fermenters.
So in fact, that's the one I went back and tasted, and I have it here. Hang on, just a. Now, that one's been sitting out for, obviously, the length of time we've been talking, but it's definitely more harsh. I actually like it less now that I've had this. When you do it, when you get that side by side, obviously I loved the second one when it came through. So these are dead on the same. I would, if you handed me these beers and told me what was different, I would tell you 5,000 different things than yeast.
Wow. It's just a really nicely well-made beer. It does remind me of just a nice, crisp American pale ale to me. I would not call it a NEIPA if you just handed me a pint of it and said, what am I drinking? I'd say, well, really good. Actually, I'd say a really good West Coast APA, to be honest, yeah.
I think the bitterness comes through nicely. It's fruity. The Mosaic definitely comes through more in this one. Like that. If you told me it was all Mosaic and there was no Citra, I would believe you. But the body's really lush, plush, whatever word you want to use. But it's a really nice beer.
Yeah, I agree. There wasn't a clunker in the whole bunch.
we have a lot of great brewers in our club, and this just shows that everyone brewed a great beer, and really fun to see how the yeast will play with the beer. I think it's the most important ingredient in beer. Some may argue with that, but at the end of the day, we're just making something for the yeast organism to have fun with.
Yeah. Were there, of the ones that aren't here, the 4 yeasts that aren't here, were there any surprises or anything that came out that you weren't expecting?
Well, the standard US-05 Chico strain came out exactly what we expected. It was just a simple Mosaic heavy IPA. Nothing New England about it, nothing lush or plush. Good IPA, just very basic.
Yeah, that's definitely not my favorite yeast, US-05, for this style. SO4 outshines it by a lot. There's still a couple we haven't even gotten to try yet. Yeah. But they'll be at social club, so we'll get at it.
Awesome. Last words.
They're all great beers. I think the best balanced beer was the last one we drank, the most imbalanced beer to itself. So it just was in its own universe, and it was happiest in its skin. So, but I thought they were all really good beers, and had you poured me a pint of any one of them, I would have thanked you very much and gone on. So it's one of the fun things about the show like this is we do kind of get to split hairs about things. But I don't think anyone should take away that the one that we quote unquote liked the least was a bad beer. It's not that at all. It's just really splitting hairs about what makes a beer shine or shine a little differently. It's just really interesting.
I think it's excellent that the club is doing this. I'm a huge mad scientist, as anybody who's gone through the archives knows. And I love that you did this. Because you could argue all day long about what the yeast will be. You've ended the argument. You have one example, and maybe if you all brewed again the exact same way, they come out slightly different. This really is a great side-by-side of this is what the yeast do. And based on this, I'd probably go with the last one for my favorite IPA, but the one before it for my favorite hazy.
Yeah, or in nitpicking here, because they're all great beers. They would fill any spectrum. I mean, they just all good all the way along. But I got a better feel now with a NEIPA, what it should be and can be, and I'm thankful for the chance to try it.
That's a good point. You've confirmed why I don't like most commercial NEIPAs, because you can make good ones.
Do you have all the names of everyone? Can we give a quick shout out to
Oh, you bet.
Yeah. So, quick shout out to all the great members that helped us brew this beer. Myself, Alex McIntosh, Scott Mendes, Jake Toback, Dick Wallace, Matt Geisler, Joshua Fogg, and Timothy Champagne.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and thanks to everybody with Ribs for all the work that that y'all are doing, and for being so far perfect hosts. This has been a great conference so far.
Small state, big beer. Small state, big beer.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. It was awesome.
Thanks, James.
Well, thanks again to Scott and Alex, and of course, thanks as always to Steve, Bob, and Zat. Lots more to come from HomebrewCon. What a great time. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check all that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.